Welcome to the Mystery Signal.
My name is Ethan, and when I was 19, I took a summer job as a camp counselor at Whispering Pines Summer Camp, hidden deep in the forests of northern Michigan. I wasn't looking for adventure. I just wanted a job that would get me away from the city for the summer. The pay was decent, food was included, and spending 3 months beside a lake sounded a lot better than stocking shelves at a grocery store. After a 5-hour drive, my GPS lost signal. The paved road turned into gravel. The gravel became dirt. Eventually, I passed a weathered wooden sign that read, Whispering Pines Summer Camp. The paint was peeling, and vines had started climbing around the edges. Something about the sign made me uneasy. Maybe it was because it looked older than the camp's website had suggested, or maybe it was the silence. There weren't any birds, no insects, just the sound of my tires crunching over the dirt road. A few minutes later, the trees opened into a beautiful clearing. There were wooden cabins surrounding a crystal clear lake. Kids were laughing near the docks. Counselors carried sports equipment across the field. For a moment, my nervous feeling disappeared. It looked like the perfect summer camp. I parked beside the main lodge and grabbed my duffel bag. A tall man in his late 50s stepped onto the porch. "You must be Ethan." I nodded. "I'm Lawson." He shook my hand. His grip was surprisingly firm. "Welcome to Whispering Pines." Inside the office, everything felt old. Wooden walls, dusty bookshelves. Old photographs of campers covered one wall. Some looked like they had been taken decades ago. Mr. Lawson handed me a folded paper map. "We have 12 cabins," he explained. "Cabins 1 through 12. He pointed at the trails leading into the forest. "Most activities stay close to camp." I unfolded the map. Everything seemed simple enough. Cabins, the lake, dining hall, archery range, hiking trails. Before I folded it back up, Lawson stopped me. "There are a few rules." His tone had changed. "Never leave the marked trails after dark." I nodded. "Never let campers wander into the north woods." Again, I nodded. Then he looked directly into my eyes. "And if you ever find a cabin that isn't on this map," he paused, "walk away." I laughed. "I think 12 cabins are enough." He didn't smile. "I'm serious." The room fell silent. A second later, he forced a smile. "Anyway, dinner's in an hour." He walked outside as if nothing had happened. I stood there staring at the map. There were only 12 cabins. No, cabin 13. No missing buildings. Nothing unusual. I convinced myself it was just one of those camp traditions meant to scare new staff. That evening, I met the other counselors. Most were college students, around my age. Everyone seemed friendly. They joked with each other while setting picnic tables beside the lake. One counselor caught my attention, a girl named Emma. She was quiet. She barely spoke during dinner. When everyone else left to prepare activities for the next morning, she stopped beside me. "You talked to Lawson?" "Yeah." "He gave you the warning." It wasn't a question. I nodded. "He mentioned some cabin that isn't on the map." Her face immediately became serious. "You laughed, didn't you?" "I mean, it sounded like a joke." She looked around to make sure nobody else could hear us. "It isn't." The wind suddenly picked up. The trees surrounding the lake began swaying. Emma lowered her voice. "If you ever see a wooden sign that says Cabin 13, don't go inside." I waited for her to smile. She didn't. "People around here pretend it doesn't exist." "What do you mean?" She looked toward the dark forest behind the cabins. "I've worked here for 3 summers. I've never seen it. But every year, someone says they did." Before I could ask another question, another counselor called her name. She quickly walked away, leaving me standing alone. That night I couldn't sleep. My cabin overlooked the lake. Moonlight reflected across the water. Everything was peaceful. Around midnight, I got up to grab a bottle of water. As I stood by the window, I noticed something strange. A flashlight moved between the trees at the edge of the forest. At first I assumed it was another counselor. But whoever it was, they weren't using the hiking trail. The light moved slowly between the trees. Then it stopped. For several seconds, it didn't move at all. It was almost as if whoever was holding it was staring directly at my cabin. Then the light went out. Complete darkness. I waited. Nothing. The next morning, nobody mentioned anyone being in the woods. Breakfast carried on like normal. Kids laughed. Counselors planned canoe races. It almost made me believe I'd imagined the flashlight. Until lunch. One of the older campers pointed toward the north woods. "Hey, what's that cabin over there?" Every conversation stopped. The camper pointed beyond the trees. I looked. For just a second, I thought I saw the corner of an old wooden roof hidden between the pines. When I looked again, it was gone. The rest of the afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen, or thought I'd seen. The corner of an old wooden cabin had been there for only a second, then it was gone. I told myself it had probably been an illusion. Sunlight shining through the trees, a fallen log, anything but an abandoned cabin. Still, the image stayed in my mind. That evening, while the campers were eating dinner in the dining hall, I sat across from Emma. She noticed I wasn't touching my food. "What's wrong?" she asked. I hesitated. I think I saw it. Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Saw what? The cabin. Every bit of color drained from her face. She quietly set her fork down. "Where?" I pointed toward the north side of camp, near the tree line. Emma looked over her shoulder, as if someone might be listening. Then she leaned closer. "Promise me something." "What?" "If you ever see it again, don't follow it." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Follow it. Cabins don't move." She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up, threw away the rest of her dinner, and walked out of the hall. That only made me more curious. The next day was filled with camp activities. Archery, swimming, kayaking. Everything felt normal again. Almost every now and then, I'd catch myself glancing toward the north woods. The trees seemed darker than the rest of the forest, like the sunlight didn't quite reach them. Late that afternoon, a camper named Tyler ran up to me. "Mr. Ethan." "What is it?" "I lost my football." "Where?" He pointed toward the woods. "It rolled over there." I sighed. "Stay here. I'll get it." I crossed the open field and stepped beneath the pine trees. The sounds of camp disappeared almost immediately. No laughter, no voices, only the wind. The football wasn't hard to find. It had landed beside a fallen tree. As I picked it up, something caught my eye. A narrow dirt path. I'd walked this area several times. I was sure that trail hadn't been there before. It was barely visible beneath patches of grass and dead leaves, almost as if no one had used it for years. For some reason, I couldn't stop staring at it. Curiosity got the better of me. I took one step, then another. The path twisted between enormous pine trees. Branches hung low enough to brush against my shoulders. The deeper I walked, the quieter the forest became. After about 5 minutes, I noticed something strange. There were no birds, no squirrels, not even insects. The entire forest felt empty. I stopped walking. Something inside me said I should turn around. That's when I saw it. A faded wooden sign, half covered by vines. The words were barely readable. "Cabin, there's." I felt my stomach drop. My first instinct was to leave. Lawson's warning echoed in my head. "If you ever find a cabin that isn't on this map, walk away." I should have listened. Instead, I kept walking. The trail widened. A few meters ahead, the trees opened into a small clearing. There it was. An old wooden cabin. Its roof sagged with age. Several windows were broken. The front porch leaned to one side. The entire building looked abandoned for decades. Yet, something didn't make sense. Fresh footprints leading to the front door. My heart started pounding. Someone had been here recently. I slowly walked closer. The cabin was silent. No movement, no sound, just the wind creaking through the old wood. The front door wasn't fully closed. It hung open by just a few inches, as though someone had walked inside and forgotten to shut it. I swallowed hard. "Ethan," a voice whispered behind me. I spun around. Nobody was there, only trees. My breathing became heavier. Maybe I'd imagined it. Then I heard it again. "Ethan." This time, it came from inside the cabin. I stood frozen. Every instinct told me to run. But before I could move, the old wooden door slowly creaked open on its own, revealing only darkness beyond the entrance. The door stopped moving. The cabin stood completely still. I don't know why I didn't run. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around and get back to camp. Instead, I pulled my flashlight from my pocket. The beam cut through the darkness inside the cabin. "Dumb idea," I whispered to myself. I pushed the door open. The hinges let out a long, painful creak. The smell hit me first. Rotting wood, mold, and something else. A strange metallic smell that reminded me of old pennies. The floorboards groaned beneath my boots. Dust covered everything. An old wooden table stood in the center of the room. Children's books lay scattered across the floor. A toy teddy bear sat in the corner. Its button eyes stared directly at me. None of it looked touched for years. Yet, there wasn't a single cobweb, almost as if someone had been cleaning the place. I slowly walked deeper inside. The flashlight landed on dozens of black and white photographs hanging on the wall. Campers, counselors, campfire nights, swimming competitions. Everything looked normal, until I noticed the dates. 1981, 1982, 1983, 1984. Every photograph ended in 1987. Nothing newer. I stepped closer. One picture showed 12 campers standing outside the main lodge. Behind them, almost hidden between the trees, was cabin 13. I frowned. Why would the cabin appear in an old photograph if nobody admitted it existed? Then I noticed something even stranger. One face had been scratched out. Not torn, not faded. Deliberately scratched with something sharp. Every copy of that same camper had been erased. My heartbeat quickened. A loud thump echoed upstairs. I froze. Another thump. Slow, heavy footsteps. Someone was walking above me. Ethan. The whisper returned. This time it came from upstairs. My mouth went dry. I knew I should leave, but curiosity won again. I climbed the staircase, one careful step at a time. Every step groaned beneath my weight. At the top was a narrow hallway. 4 small bedrooms. Every door stood open. The first room was empty. The second still had rusted bunk beds. The third contained dozens of children's drawings taped to the walls. Most showed trees, lakes, cabins. But every drawing included one thing, a cabin with the number 13. None of the children had drawn cabin 12 or cabin 11. Only cabin 13. I reached the final room. The door slowly swung wider on its own. Inside, an old wooden desk faced the window. A faded guest register rested on top. My hands trembled as I opened it. Names filled every page. Campers, counselors, staff. The final page ended with a single sentence written in shaky handwriting. If you're reading this, don't let it know you've seen the cabin. A cold chill ran through my body. Behind me, the bedroom door slammed shut. Bang! I spun around. The room was empty. My flashlight flickered. Once, twice. Then a child's laugh echoed from the hallway. Soft, high-pitched, very close. Another laugh answered it. Then another. Soon, dozens of children were laughing outside the room. I rushed to the door and pulled it open. The hallway was empty. The laughter stopped instantly. My breathing echoed through the cabin. I turned back toward the desk. The guest register was gone. In its place lay a photograph. I picked it up. It was an old camp group photo, dated summer 1987. I felt my blood run cold. Standing in the back row, wearing the same camp counselor shirt I had on that day, was me. Not someone who looked like me. The same face, the same scar above my eyebrow, the same watch on my wrist. I dropped the photograph. At that exact moment, a loud voice echoed from outside. Ethan? It was Emma. Ethan, run. The entire cabin shook violently. The walls groaned. Windows shattered. The floor beneath my feet cracked. I sprinted downstairs. The front door burst open as I ran outside. The moment my feet touched the forest trail, everything became silent. I turned around. The clearing was gone. No cabin, no trail, only dense pine trees. Emma grabbed my arm. We have to go. She pulled me through the forest until we reached the edge of camp. Neither of us spoke. That night, I packed my bags. I didn't tell anyone what happened. The next morning, I drove away from Whispering Pines. About an hour down the road, I stopped at a gas station. While paying for fuel, I reached into my backpack for my wallet. Something else was inside. The old photograph. I was about to throw it away when I noticed one final detail. Yesterday, there had been 12 people standing in the picture. Now, there were 13, and the person standing beside me was smiling directly at the camera. I had never seen his face before, but underneath him, someone had written one sentence in faded black ink. See you next summer. I had always wanted to test myself. When I found a 2-week wilderness survival camp in the Cascade Mountains, it sounded like the perfect challenge. No phones, no internet, just forests, mountains, and learning how to survive in the wild. The website called it Summit Ridge Survival Camp. It promised to teach tracking, shelter, building, navigation, and wilderness survival. It sounded exciting, so I signed up. After nearly 6 hours of driving through winding mountain roads, I finally reached the camp. Canvas tents surrounded a large campfire. Towering pine trees stretched in every direction. The nearest town was almost 50 miles away. It felt completely isolated. As I stepped out of my car with my hiking backpack, the mountain air felt colder than I expected. Several other campers were already unpacking their gear. Most were around my age. A tall, bearded instructor wearing an old ranger hat walked toward us. My name's Daniel. I'll be leading this course. He looked like someone who had spent his entire life in the wilderness. After everyone arrived, Daniel gathered us around the campfire. There are 12 tents, 1 camper per tent. You'll be responsible for your own equipment. He pointed toward the forest surrounding the campsite. You can explore during the day, but after dark, stay inside the camp. His voice became more serious. If you hear anything outside your tent after midnight, don't answer it. A few campers laughed. One guy beside me whispered, "Probably bears." Daniel heard him. "No. No." His expression never changed. "Bears don't knock." Silence spread around the fire. Then Daniel smiled. "Let's hope none of you find out." Everyone laughed nervously. I wasn't sure whether he was joking. That evening we learned how to build emergency shelters and start fires without matches. By sunset, everyone was exhausted. I carried my sleeping bag into tent 7. It was small, but comfortable. A lantern hung from the center pole. My backpack rested beside my sleeping bag. Outside, I could hear campers talking around the fire. The sounds slowly faded as everyone went to sleep. The forest became unbelievably quiet. Sometime during the night, I woke up. At first, I didn't know why. The lantern had burned out. The tent was almost completely dark. I checked my wristwatch. 2:11 a.m. Then I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps. Slow footsteps. Circling my tent. I held my breath. The footsteps stopped. Everything became silent. For nearly a minute, nothing happened. Then, knock. A single knock landed against the tent wall. Not loud, not soft, just one slow knock. I sat frozen inside my sleeping bag. Another knock, this time closer, almost beside my head. Then a calm voice whispered through the canvas. "Can you help me?" It sounded like a young woman. "I think I'm lost." I remembered Daniel's warning. "Don't answer it." The voice spoke again. "Please, I can't find my tent." Every instinct told me to unzip the entrance, but something about her voice felt wrong. It never sounded frightened. It sounded practiced, almost like she had said those exact words hundreds of times before. I stayed completely still. Outside, the footsteps started moving again, slowly circling the tent. Then they stopped directly in front of the entrance. The zipper moved, just a little, as though someone was testing it. I reached for my flashlight. My hand was shaking. Then, 3 slow knocks echoed against the tent flap. Knock, knock, knock. And a voice, now much lower than before, whispered, "I know you're awake." I didn't move. The 3 knocks still echoed in my head. Then, silence. Not normal silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. I kept staring at the tent entrance, flashlight clutched tightly in my hand. Whoever or whatever was outside wasn't moving. A minute passed. Then another. I almost convinced myself it had gone away. That's when I heard breathing. Slow. Deep. Right outside the tent flap. It wasn't the sound of someone catching their breath. It sounded like something deliberately breathing. So I'd know it was still there. I reached for the zipper, but stopped. Daniel's warning replayed in my mind. If you hear anything outside your tent after midnight, don't answer it. I stayed perfectly still. A few seconds later, the breathing stopped. Then came footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They moved away from my tent. Relief washed over me, until I heard another tent unzip. Someone else had ignored the warning. A man's voice called out, "Hello? You need help?" No one answered. Then, a blood-curdling scream tore through the forest. It lasted only a second. Then it stopped. Every tent in the campsite remained silent. No one moved. No one shouted. It was as if everyone was too afraid to even breathe. I gripped my flashlight tighter. Another minute passed. Then I heard footsteps again. This time, they were circling my tent. Slower than before. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The shadow of 2 feet appeared through the canvas. Whoever stood there wasn't walking anymore. They were just standing, watching. I raised the flashlight toward the tent wall. The beam revealed a human-shaped silhouette, too tall. Its head nearly touched the top of the tent. Then something impossible happened. The shadow slowly tilted its head, almost 90 degrees, like it was listening. My heart pounded so hard I thought I could hear it. A calm voice whispered through the canvas. "Ethan." I froze. I had never told anyone my name. The voice continued. "You can come outside now." It left. It sounded exactly like Daniel. Every word, every pause, even his deep voice. But Daniel had warned us never to leave our tents. I knew it wasn't him. The thing outside laughed softly, not loudly, just enough to know it had been caught. Then it walked away. The rest of the night passed without another sound. I didn't sleep. As soon as the sun rose, I unzipped the tent. Every camper looked exhausted. Daniel stood beside the campfire. One tent was empty. Tent 9. Daniel looked at us without saying a word. Finally, he spoke. I told you not to answer. No one asked where the camper had gone, because deep down, we already knew. No one spoke during breakfast. The empty seat beside the campfire said everything. Tent 9's camper was gone. Daniel finally broke the silence. Pack your gear. We're leaving for the day's navigation exercise. Several campers looked at each other in disbelief. One girl finally asked, "What about Ryan?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared into the forest. If he's still alive, he'll find the camp. Nobody believed him. We spent the morning hiking through the mountains. Daniel acted as if nothing had happened. He taught us how to read animal tracks, how to find clean water, how to identify edible plants. But every camper kept looking over their shoulder. Around noon, we reached an old fire lookout tower. It had obviously been abandoned for years. Its wooden stairs creaked in the wind. Inside the tower was a dusty metal cabinet. Daniel unlocked it with an old key. He removed a faded notebook. "This stays here," he said. "No one touches it." As he walked outside to check our route, curiosity got the better of me. I quietly opened the notebook. Every page listed names, campers, dates. Each year had one name circled in red. 1989, 1990, 1991, 1992, 1993, 1994. Only one name each year. On the final page, today's date was already written. Under it, one name, Ryan. I felt my stomach drop. Daniel came back before I could read more. He snatched the notebook away. "You shouldn't have opened that." That evening, the atmosphere around camp had completely changed. Nobody laughed. Nobody talked. As darkness fell, Daniel stood beside the fire. "This is your last warning. If you hear knocking tonight, no matter whose voice you hear, do not leave your tent." Then he looked directly at me. "Especially you, Ethan." That night, I wasn't asleep when midnight came. I sat with my flashlight already in my hand. 12:42, 7 a.m., 1:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. Nothing. Then, knock. One slow knock. Not on my tent. On someone else's. Another knock. Farther away. Then another. The sound moved from tent to tent, slowly circling the campsite. Finally, it reached mine. Knock. The canvas barely moved. A familiar voice whispered, "Ethan." It was Ryan. I made it back. "Please open the tent." Tears almost filled my eyes. It sounded exactly like him. Then I remembered. Ryan had disappeared yesterday morning. No one had seen him since. I stayed silent. The voice changed. Now it sounded like Daniel. "Good job. It's safe now." Still, I didn't move. Then the whisper became something impossible. It became my own voice. "Ethan, open the tent. You know you want to." Every hair on my arm stood up. The thing outside wasn't copying people anymore. It was copying me. Then, it laughed. A horrible, distorted laugh that sounded like dozens of voices speaking together. Footsteps slowly walked away. At sunrise, Daniel gathered us one last time. "There won't be another lesson today." He pointed toward the trail leading out of camp. "The course is over." Nobody argued. Everyone packed as quickly as possible. As I loaded my backpack into my SUV, I looked back one last time. The camp was completely empty. No campers, no instructors, no tents. Only the cold mountain wind. Confused, I blinked. Everything returned to normal. The camp was there again. Daniel was standing beside the fire, watching me. He raised one hand and waved. I drove away without stopping. 3 days later, I unpacked my backpack at home. Something heavy was inside. A small camping bell. I had never seen it before. Tied to it was a faded paper tag. In shaky handwriting, it read, "Next time, answer the first knock." I threw it into the bin. That night, at exactly 2:11 a.m., someone knocked 3 times on my bedroom door. My name is Ethan, and this happened 3 summers ago. I had just accepted a seasonal job as a camp counselor at a place called Whispering Pines Summer Camp. It's sat beside a beautiful lake, hidden deep inside a pine forest, nearly 2 hours from the nearest town. The brochure made it look perfect. Fresh air, kayaking, campfires, hiking. It looked like the kind of place where kids would make memories for the rest of their lives. I arrived just before sunset. The gravel road ended at an old wooden entrance sign that read, Whispering Pines Summer Camp. I parked beside the main lodge and grabbed my duffel bag. The camp looked peaceful. Children were laughing near the lake. Counselors were unloading supplies. The smell of campfire smoke drifted through the cool mountain air. For a moment, I wondered why the previous counselor had quit so suddenly. Inside the camp office, the director, Mrs. Carter, handed me a map. "There are 12 cabins," she said. She pointed to each one before stopping near the edge of the map. Then she quietly folded that corner over. "Don't go into the North Woods after dark." I smiled. I wasn't planning to. She didn't smile back. "I'm serious. If you ever hear children laughing from those trees at night, ignore it." Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed, as if she'd given the same warning 100 times. The first 2 days were completely normal. I helped with canoe races, archery, campfire games. Nothing felt unusual. Then, during lunch, on the third day, one of the older campers leaned toward me. "Have you seen the extra cabin?" I frowned. "What extra cabin?" He pointed toward the North Woods. "Sometimes you can see it, but only for a minute." I looked where he was pointing, between the pine trees. I could just make out the corner of an old wooden cabin. It looked abandoned, weathered, almost hidden by the forest. I blinked. It was gone. Only trees remained. I looked back at the camper. He wasn't smiling. "My brother saw it last summer," he whispered. The next morning, he couldn't remember ever seeing it. A cold chill ran through me. That evening, I unfolded the camp map again. 12 cabins. Nothing else. No abandoned building. No trail leading north. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen something standing between those trees. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. I couldn't stop thinking about the cabin. Every time I looked toward the North Woods, I expected it to appear again, but it never did, at least, not during the day. That night, the campers gathered around the campfire, while one of the older counselors, Mr. Harris, told ghost stories. Most of the kids laughed. I didn't. I kept watching the tree line. For just a second, I thought I saw someone standing between the pines. When I looked again, they were gone. The next morning, I asked Mrs. Carter about the abandoned cabin. Her smile disappeared. "I don't know what you're talking about, but I saw it." "No, you didn't." She walked away before I could ask another question. It was the first time I'd seen genuine fear on her face. That afternoon, I borrowed one of the camp maps from the office. I searched every trail, every cabin, every maintenance road. There were only 12 cabins, nothing else. Yet I knew what I'd seen. After dinner, curiosity finally won. Just before sunset, I slipped away from the camp and walked toward the North Woods. The forest became strangely quiet. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Then, I noticed something. A narrow trail. It wasn't on the map. Tall grass and branches almost completely hid it. It looked as though nobody had walked there in years. I followed it. The farther I walked, the colder the air became. After nearly 10 minutes, the trees opened into a small clearing. There it was, the abandoned cabin, exactly where I'd seen it before. Its faded wooden walls leaned slightly to one side. Broken windows stared into the forest like empty eyes. A rusted lantern hung beside the front door. Above it was a weathered wooden sign, Cabin Terese. My pulse quickened. There were only supposed to be 12 cabins. I slowly climbed the porch steps. Every board creaked beneath my boots. The front door was slightly open. It moved gently in the breeze, as if someone had just walked inside. I called out, "Hello." No answer, only silence. Then, somewhere inside the cabin, a child laughed, just once. Soft, distant, then nothing. I stepped back instinctively. The sound hadn't come from outside. It had come from upstairs. The sunlight was already fading. Every instinct told me to leave. Instead, I pushed the door open. The moment I stepped inside cabin 13, the front door slammed shut behind me. I spun around. The handle wouldn't move, no matter how hard I pulled. The cabin was silent. My flashlight swept across the room. Dust covered everything. Old wooden chairs, rotting bookshelves, broken toys scattered across the floor. A faded teddy bear sat alone in the corner. It looked almost untouched, as if someone had placed it there yesterday. I searched the first floor. Every room was empty, until my flashlight landed on one wall. Hundreds of black and white summer camp photographs. Most were from the early 1980s. Children smiling, counselors posing, campfires, canoes, normal memories. Except for one thing. In every photograph, the same child's face had been violently scratched away. Every single one. No matter where he stood, someone had deliberately erased him. At the end of the hallway stood a narrow wooden staircase. Every step groaned beneath my boots. The second floor was colder, much colder. 4 bedroom doors stood open. Inside the first room, dozens of children's drawings covered every wall. Cabins, trees, the lake, and cabin 13. Every drawing showed the same cabin. Some were signed with children's names. Others simply read, "It found me." A dusty wooden desk sat beneath the window. On it rested an old leather guest register. The final page listed campers from the summer of 1987. 13 children, 1 counselor. Every name ended with the same word, missing. My breathing became shallow. That wasn't possible. How could an entire cabin of people disappear? Beneath the register lay a weathered notebook page. The handwriting looked rushed, as if the writer had been terrified. It read, "If you're reading this, don't let it know you've seen the cabin. If you leave, never look back." The bedroom door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the entire cabin. I grabbed the handle. Locked. Children laughed somewhere in the hallway. Soft. Playful. Too many voices to count. I swung the flashlight toward the doorway. Nothing. The laughter stopped instantly. Then, tiny footsteps ran across the upstairs hallway. Back and forth, always just outside the room. The door slowly creaked open by itself. The hallway was empty. At the far end, a small figure stood with its back toward me. A child, perfectly still. My flashlight flickered. Just once. When the light returned, the hallway was empty again. I backed toward the stairs. One step, then another. I didn't run. Not yet. Something deep inside me kept repeating the words from the notebook. Don't look back. I reached the front door. This time, it opened. Cold evening air rushed inside. I stepped outside, pulled the door shut behind me, and walked away. I never looked back until I heard children laughing behind me.